So I am super stoked. I've got this amazing guest with an incredible story, and he just has so much great information. He's a great interviewer too. So if you get a chance, hop onto his podcast, the Agent Podcast, which is incredible.
Thanks, Jim.
And I happened to be a guest on his podcast a few weeks back, and so I wanted to get Ray over here because he's got a lot of great information to share. So welcome, Ray. And again, Ray, your last name is Sjolseth, right? Sjolseth.
Sjolseth, like Dr. Scholes.
Got it.
Jim, thanks for having me, man. It's a privilege to be here with you and, 30 plus years of unbelievable battles, war wounds, experience, and stories.
Yeah, we've you come on the battlefield, you get a few scars, but those are what's interesting, right? That's what makes life interesting, is the journey.
The contrast that lets you know what you want.
Exactly. So Ray, tell us your story, your backstory, because you got an incredible backstory. We're talking about it right before we started filming here. So tell the audience, your story.
Sure. So I was a horrible student. I graduated high school with a 1.8 GPA. I did not go to college like some other guy I know.
Yeah.
And, I started, it's funny, I started in real estate just as an investor. I bought a foreclosure at 19 for 65 grand in California, of all places, if you can believe that. Put 10 grand into it, lived there. The place ended up having a value 5 years later for like 300,000. So I went and I bought some other properties, and that's how I got into real estate.
Interesting. Nice.
But I was never on the front end of real estate. I was never selling it. I was never, doing that exchange. I was always just an investor. And here, 30 years later, I've been invested in 7 different states and a ton of different properties, single family homes, multifamily homes, mixed use, light commercial, that type of stuff.
Wow.
But that was never my primary thing. I was always a product creator. So I've had 45 companies, 40 have failed for a whole bunch of different reasons. 5 have done well, and 2 I've had exits to public companies.
Wow.
That's been a hell of an experience.
I can imagine. So with that experience, I mean, you've learned a lot about being an entrepreneur, and realtors are entrepreneurs, and we're business owners. We often, agents often don't think of themselves as like the CEO and president of their own company, but they truly are. I mean, what are your takeaways from not just your successes, but from your failures? And what were your greatest lessons over the years?
Well, so I think that's a huge point, is that you go to real estate school and you get your license, and nobody tells you you're starting a business.
Right.
Nobody tells you you're an entrepreneur. Nobody tells you you're the owner of a startup. Nobody tells you you're CEO, janitor, and your number 1 employee, which could be your best or worst asset. That's the reality of the situation, right? That's why within the real estate, there's an 87% failure rate of agents. And I just think people are not equipped, and the education system is broken, and we could talk for days about the education system in general, let alone the real estate education system.
Right.
But, my takeaway is that you have to be resilient, and you have to be able to sustain getting kicked in the face a lot. Without a face guard. You are a goalie at a hockey game when you get out there in the real estate field, and it's funny, Jim, we were talking when you were on my podcast, and my wife and I are just getting our licenses here in Chicago and going to market as a husband-wife team. And, I have 30 years of background in real estate on the investment side again. So it's different for sure.
Yeah.
But my wife's a brand new agent. Right. And we went to real estate school together, and she's overwhelmed by all of this stuff. And I'm just like, dude, it's going to be okay. Trust me, but it's a process. And I think that the roadmap for everybody is different, because there's so many different ways to build your business. And literally, we just got off a call with somebody from our organization, and I set the call, and the plan for the call was, hey, we have this amount of time a week to spend on our business. We know the first priority is we need branding. We need to be able to be seen and get found, and then lead generation, right? We can't do 10 different lead gen activities. It makes no sense. So we picked 3, and then we'll go to market. But you don't learn that stuff when you go to real estate school as an agent.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? That they don't teach lead generation, and they don't teach business planning. So let me ask you this. So when you talk about resiliency being such an important trait, I think it's so true because agents on a daily basis kind of get kicked in the face. And, you just having the mental wherewithal to not to start one company, but to start 40 or 45 actually, and fail 40 times. I mean, you have amazing resilience. I mean, how did you kind of bootstrap yourself, pick yourself up and say, I'm not just going to try this again. I'm going to try it again and again and again and again until I get it right. How'd you do that?
Well, so
Mentally,
that's the thing,
I
right?
mean, the mental toughness of that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I've gotten it right, and then I messed it all up because
Yeah.
I made wrong decisions, and I had to rebuild, right? Like
Right.
that is a real life thing. But I didn't have a traditional childhood, and there's always thing, right? Nature versus nurture. How much was programmed from me in my DNA, from the universe or whatever you believe in, versus what was programmed in my paradigm from my environment, and I don't know that we'd ever know, but what I do know is that you have the ability to become whatever you want. So for me, I had so much contrast on what I didn't want to be coming out of the childhood that I had, that I knew there was better. I knew I was meant for more, but I also knew it was going to take a lot of work, and I wouldn't learn it from the people that I was surrounded by.
Right.
Right. So I was always looking for a figure to follow. And sometimes when I found those figures to follow, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Right. So I had to move my position. It's no different. Like Bob Proctor, who recently passed, who's a legend, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He always said, you're going to have this goal and you're going to put it right here. But then when you get right here, you're going to realize you should have went right here. Ain't that a bitch was his word, right? But it's the truth. Right. So if you can truly begin with the end in mind and know that it's going to be start, stop, reverse. And what I mean by that is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like that's the nature of success, is failing your way to success. And you will have to start over again and again and again. And, I was never a big meditator, right? I was like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to sit there quiet and om and do whatever. But what I realized from the last 3 years of spending more time focusing on meditation is it's not necessarily about sitting. It's not necessarily about having silence. It's about being at peace with yourself enough to know that you can begin again at any point. So for me, the resilience came from, okay, I'm going to start over. Okay, I'm going to start over. Okay, I'm going to start over. And the goal is, even if it's me making the same mistake 3 times, eventually I'll figure it out. Or eventually I'm going to have somebody that'll be like, dude, stop going right. There's a wall there. Go left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what it takes, because we're all our worst enemy. And us as humans do really stupid things.
There's a lot to unpack in what you just said, but with the issue of, or the comment about you got to fail your way to success. I think for agents entering this business, it can look as, especially over the last 10 years where we've kind of had a straight up path and the market's been incredible. But now we're facing headwinds. I mean, we're facing rapidly rising interest rates, rapidly rising inflation. We've got a war now in Europe, and the market is not going to be the same as it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. There's going to be a massive change in the market. So when we look at that, and this idea of failing forward, I think there's a lot of agents that haven't experienced a lot of failure because they've been taking a listing and they get 10 offers immediately. That's not a normal market.
Yeah,
right?
No, you're just an order taker.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of mindset, and there's a level of instant gratification that comes too, and kind of moving away from this thought that I'm owed a living, right? And I deserve to just be handed everything. That failing forward all the time is such an essential part of success. And I think that you've learned it from having 40 companies and failing over and over and over again. So that's a really, really important comment for agents listening is, am I prepared for failure? Can I take it? And what do I do when I have failure? Do I run, or do I stand up and just keep fighting?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because in real estate, it doesn't matter whether the market is good or bad. What matters is you understand what game you're playing in that specific market.
Yes.
Right. So my analogy of some of this is like going to a rock concert. It's all good when you are the person visiting the rock concert, right? You have a good time, you're drinking, having fun, going out, whatever. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You're not the roadie carrying all the gear in and out of the cities. in and out of the bus, setting up the stage, dealing with unions and labor people and, you know, broken hardware in the middle of a concert 1 hour before. The amp's not working. What do we do? The mixer's broken, you know, whatever. This dude broke his guitar because he got pissed off last time, like whatever it is. There's so much behind the scenes work that people don't realize in this business, you know, and the thing that I've learned, honestly, over the last 6 months from talking to so many people on the front end, as my wife and I have pivoted what we're doing, is it is the mundane, daily, repetitive stuff, specifically in this business, that will make your success over time. And like with you specifically, something I walked away from our conversation with was the 4-1-1-1-1. I think I said that right.
That's it. You got it.
Like that has stuck with me because it is so simple and so pure and duplicatable and scalable for whether you're a solo agent or you're an actual, you know, you're building a team of agents, where if you cannot overwhelm people, people will succeed.
Yeah.
You know, if you give them the tools and they want to work, don't get me wrong, right? They have to want what they want or want what they say they want in order to go and do the work to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that is a huge key, is just to be able to wake up, and while some days it may feel like Groundhog's Day, it's that work that you have to do. And it doesn't matter if you feel like it. That's irrelevant. You need to show up and be consistent.
Right. And just for the listeners that haven't heard the 4-1-1-1, just really quickly, if you're wondering what that means, 1 hour uninterrupted prospecting a day. The goal is to set one appointment from your prospecting. You're going on one appointment a day, and you're adding one person a day to your sphere of influence. That little formula is kind of a perfect model for creating amazing success in the industry. But Ray, when you're talking about you're landing on the ground in real estate, and I'm going to be so excited to watch your journey, because I think you're going to have an amazing journey. And there's a lot of people listening that are in your same boat, like I'm just starting, or I just started, or I'm about ready to start. Is your step one is I'm going to establish some great branding. Step two is I'm going to, and maybe at the same time, I'm going to dive deep into lead generation. Now, you said you had targeted 3 areas, and I'm curious, just and every market's different.
Sure.
Every person's different, but what are your 3 target areas? I'm curious.
So the first one is a Facebook marketplace strategy that we're going to be running, where we're hoping to turn renters into buyers.
Love it.
That's number 1. Number 2 is FSBOs and landlords.
Love it.
Right? Because now we can create our own listings for our buyers.
Good.
Right? So everyone's complaining about inventory. Okay, let's go figure out inventory and solve our own problem, right? We have the power to make our own economy. And number 3 is what I'm calling TikTok tours. It's the ability to go into your community with local businesses, local neighborhoods, parks, things that you use in and out with your family, and either make a combination of TikTok and Instagram Reels, or even YouTube Shorts.
Love
right?
it.
Where you can leverage all of those platforms with the same quick, short video format that you can edit kind of real time and get up there, with having to, you know, go create this long form video. And then you have to deal with editing and production and all this other stuff that I'm used to doing on the back end with the podcast. But we only have so much bandwidth, you know, like my wife and I have 5 kids, 3 dogs, 2 of the kids are special needs. And we have to create a system within our business that we can make work for us. And that's another thing that's not talked about, is you have the ability to create whatever business you want, but you need to start with what your schedule looks like and what actual is something that's deliverable on a consistent basis. Because I'd rather be consistent than say, okay, I can do 2 hours on Monday and 14 hours on Tuesday, right? That is no way to live. I'd rather know that I have 4 hours a week to lead gen and put those hours to work consistently, rather than commit to all this other BS that's not going to be relevant to my business or drive it forward.
I love it. So, you know, compound actions create compound results. And I think that's 100%. What you're talking about. So you need to be consistent daily. And I love the idea of having a bite-sized thing that you can do every single day. So, I mean, and you're talking about the other thing, which I love, is hyper-local content online is where it's at. Because that's where you can win the war against like a Zillow or Realtor.com. You can't win the war at scale because they're just got $1 billion backing. But you can always win the war with your own sphere of influence and the people that know, like, and trust you, and you can win the war in your local community because they can never connect with people, the people in your community and your community. So it's just a brilliant strategies. I love it.
Yeah.
Now,
So to add to that, Jim, the last thing that I'm doing for both for the community and for lead gen long-term is I started a second podcast. That podcast is called the Chicago Podcast. And the point of that podcast is to give local businesses, operators, and entrepreneurs a voice and a platform to elevate their business, to build their brand, right? Because most people won't ever start a YouTube channel or a podcast or anything like that, right? Maybe they're afraid, maybe they don't know how, maybe they don't have time or don't want to make time to do that. For me, with what I've created from my first podcast, the Agent Podcast, I've been able to create a very efficient way of doing it. But what I learned from it is I get uninterrupted time like we have right here with somebody to build and nurture a relationship and start a conversation where it's not fake. It's legitimate. I can build this real relationship and connect with somebody and ask them real questions about their life. So now I want to go build that for the community. But I know what's going to happen over time is I'm going to build and expand my network, and that's going to build me a referral base, and I become a resource. They become a resource. And that's that hyper local audience that all these big companies can't get to.
I love that because, and what happens when you invite somebody to come on a podcast is, I don't care who you are, it's an ego stroke. And you know, like,
100%.
hey, that's cool. I'd love to be on your podcast. Everybody loves an audience, right? I don't care who you are. Everybody loves an audience. And this is such an easy way for people that maybe have a fear, maybe getting up in front of a crowd or something. This is just a conversation. And it's so smart because now you're building this relationship, because what people don't realize about podcasting is there's a conversation that happens before the podcast starts. There's a conversation that happens after the podcast ends. And then we're in contact, you know, sometimes just through email and conversation. How can I help you? What can I do for you? And that's where you're networking. So what a great idea that if you're doing this in a community, you're doing this with community leaders. I read a whole article one time. It was about having power centers, and these power centers being in every community, large and small. There's these groups of people that, you know, kind of run the show, so to speak. You know, you got 20 or 30 people that are really, you know, pretty leveraging into the community. And if you can just tap into those people, now you can leapfrog over other agents. So kind of the same concept. If you start reaching out and doing interviews with these top leaders in your community, wow, great things can happen. Smart, super smart.
Yeah, it's 100%, right? It's about taking that quantum leap. But to touch on the lead gen thing for a minute too, I think people have to realize that you can have a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
You know, and there is this delayed gratification from the long-term strategy. But again, if you do these consistent things day in and day out over time, you're going to build an unbelievable machine that has momentum. And that's going to be the difference that takes you from, you know, 4, 5, 6 listings a year to 70, 80, 100, and so forth and so on as you catapult your business to success.
And what's interesting about your strategy too, I think, is when somebody told me one time, do something that today that your future self will thank you for, which is kind of what you're doing here.
Yeah.
Because when you're building this content out, first of all, you can use it in multiple platforms. You're talking about using it on TikTok and Reels and YouTube stories or shorts. So you're building one piece of content, using it in multiple areas, but then that's evergreen content in most cases, right? Yep. So that content's going to live forever, so to speak, online. And you're just building this mountain of data, this mountain of content that's going to just be a magnet, and that magnet will just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So that your future self 5 years ago is going to get a lead from this work that you did today, which I think is just brilliant, because what a lot of people get trapped into is the instant gratification. I'm going to get a lead from something I did today, but that means I got to do something tomorrow, something the next day and the next day and the next day. So your strategy is super smart. I love it.
Well, and going back to your 4-1-1-1-1-1, like
right.
I'm implementing that for my wife and I because it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like, again, it's very simple. It's a very low common denominator to achieve. And the other thing that you said, which was a key, was even if you don't have a buyer or seller appointment, but you have an appointment with somebody in your sphere of influence, that counts.
Absolutely.
And that's okay that may happen more at the beginning as you build your database and as you start cultivating these relationships and talking to people. But again, over time, it's such a small goal that just has massive results.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and it's that compound effect. So, I mean, thank you for that. Like, that's amazing. I know it took you 30 years of getting kicked in the teeth to
Oh
come up
yeah.
with it, but
I failed forward, just like you're talking
yeah,
about.
it's so good. And to everybody listening or watching out there, like, I cannot tell you enough. Take something simple that works and that's proven and just implement it and do it. Don't ask questions. Just do it.
Yeah. Run the plays that work, right?
Yeah, run the plays that work.
Yeah, this makes total sense. That's a great statement from Tom Ferry, who's an incredible successful guy too. So when you're building, do you have an idea in your mind, like, and maybe you don't, but I'm just curious. You're kind of starting some fresh things, right? You've had businesses in the past, so this real estate gig is going to be a fresh idea. So you're starting new channels, let's call it. So you're going to have a channel on TikTok. You're going to have a channel on this YouTube and so forth. Do you have in your mind, like, I've got a metric I want to hit with these things? Like, I want so many followers in these categories to feel like I'm really hitting my stride, or is that just like not even an issue for you? You're just not even thinking about that.
Yeah. So I don't even think about that when I start.
Yeah.
Right. The goal when starting is, what platform am I the most comfortable on? And I want to focus on doing that and getting consistent. Right. So let's take TikTok as an example. Yeah. My wife is very comfortable on TikTok, right? She loves the trending dances, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
I'm warming up to doing that stuff with her, right? But it's not my natural instinct.
Of course.
So we'll jump on those, we'll do that stuff, but then we'll repurpose that content and put it on Instagram and put it on Facebook.
Sure.
And put it where it makes sense, right? But that takes a lot of time. Like, even just doing my podcast, it is a production. You know, and I don't have an army of editors sitting in the back over here, right? Like, I started doing it myself. Now I'm at the point where I have a freelance editor where we have a system. You know, I just drop the episodes in there. He does the editing, he releases them, I publish them. But I listen to every episode and write the description manually before I publish it, because it's very personal to me. Like, I want to make my guest feel like $1 million when they read that description, right? Regardless of where they're at in their life. That's very important to me for the relationship.
Sure.
So if I'm on 10 platforms, do I have to do that 10 times? Sometimes it depends on the platform.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I rather start small and get really good. Like, when I focused on the podcast, I only did Facebook.
Yeah.
Right. And I do a post on Facebook. Then I started sharing to my Facebook stories. Then I started sharing to LinkedIn. Then I started sharing to Pinterest. Then I started sharing to Instagram. So over 6 months now, that's built up and I'm starting to get better. But I'm not setting myself up for disappointment by having this ridiculous expectation, like, oh, I'm going to launch my TikTok video and have 100,000 followers immediately. You know, like, I don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's a healthy relationship to have with yourself, to set those expectations. I think if you feel good about what you're creating and you're just proud of yourself for doing it consistently and getting it out there, that's where you need to start.
And that's such a great comment too, because when you got to think about the quality of the content will ultimately attract the people, right? And some people are focused on just pushing out content instead of having quality content. And I think that's such a massive difference too. Super smart.
Well, yeah. And then it's going to take you time to figure out what hashtags work for you. And are you hyper local in your neighborhood? What hashtags aren't you using that you should be, right? And that's where, like, Gary Vaynerchuk says, it takes 50 hours to even just learn a platform, not even master it, just kind of learn how it works, right? So for now, I'm putting in my 50 hours of how does it actually work and what are the best practices? And then I can start to tweak it to what makes sense for my audience, what makes sense for my community, and really start figuring that out. But I can't do that out of the box. It doesn't work that way.
I'm curious, just as a side note, with because you've had this experience with the Agent podcast, do you pay for, do you do paid promotion, or is it all organic? And are you going to be paying for promotion on your agent side when you start your agent side?
So right now, everything is 100% organic.
Got it. Yeah.
It's all organic. My audience is around 3,000 people on Facebook. There's no paid traffic. I'm just crossing 5,000 downloads. And, you know, to some people, that's not a lot. To me, it's a lot. I'm proud that I've been able to be consistent and deliver with our kids' schedule and our family dynamic. Like, it is hard to be consistent some days. So I'm proud of that, right? So my measurement is consistency over volume.
Yeah. And I think that's the ultimate measurement for all of us, because you'll win inevitably from the people that are just not going to be consistent. 95% of the people aren't going to be consistent. Maybe 99% of people aren't going to be consistent.
Right. So now that I'm
huge.
consistent and I can say, okay, I'm learning my audience better. I see where people are falling off, or, what episodes work. Like, the truth is, what I've learned is my best episodes are the ones where it is open, deep, real life discussion about things versus real estate at all.
Right. Yeah. People want to know the people.
People want to know about the people, right? Because the people build the businesses.
Yeah.
And those are my best performing. So I'm trying to do more of that because it's working, right? So I want to do more of what's working. And the same it'll be for my other podcast,
I love it. And it's really about the story. And I think people forget that stories are what resonates with people, right? Yep. And this is true in real estate with your clients too. Like, people always do this marketing. I just sold, just pended. Nobody cares. It's all about the story of how it went pended, the story of the client, right? And that's what people remember. And I think that's really interesting as well. Ray, what if you're going to give somebody advice, like somebody that's just entering into business, whether it's real estate or not, and you say, hey, during your first year, here's my best piece of advice to give to you. What would that piece of advice be?
Be patient with yourself. That would be number one. I think that it's okay not to be okay. And that took me 47 years to learn and admit. I'm 47.
Oh, write that down. Right now. It's okay. It's okay. I think I need to write that down. It's okay not to be okay.
It's okay not to be okay. Great. And, again, going back to the beginning, where my resilience or tenacity or even fearlessness came from, because I'm definitely the guy who jumps off the cliff and builds the plane on the way down. 100%.
Risk taker. Yep.
I was never taught to really understand how I feel, and like sit in those thoughts and realize that it's okay not to be okay. So if you find yourself not okay, look at yourself in the mirror or find somebody to talk to. And it's okay not to be okay. And from there, you can begin again. Like, I just had this conversation with one of my old one-on-one coaching clients that, we've turned into really good friends. She has 6 kids, and she has her own family dynamic issues with a blended family. And she's a brand new agent. She was a phlebotomist for like 25 years. And she's now been in the business about 14 months. She's done a handful of transactions. She was just super down. I'm like, you know what? You need to find somebody to manage your kids for 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever you can afford or get away with. And go sit in the lobby at the Four Seasons Hotel with a pen and a paper and a drink or a coffee, whatever makes you feel good, and just go chill and tell yourself that it's okay to begin again. And some days you have to do that every day. I mean, some days I do that every hour, right? You just, okay, let's start over. And if you learn to do that and get better control of your emotions and feelings over time, man, Jim, that is a life changer. Like, it legitimately is, right? Because in any business, let alone the real estate business, the real estate business is comprised of 2 things to make any transaction work: people and partners. That's it. This is a people and partner business, and it is very emotional, right?
Yeah,
because the mortgage guy said he was going to do this and he didn't do that, or the title person effed this up, or whatever the scenario may be. Like, things happen.
Yeah.
This is life. So you have to realize the only thing you're in control of is you. When you learn to master control of yourself, it's life-changing. And I'm still learning. I'm not an expert by any means, but I am learning that the better I get at being me, the better my relationships will be, the better my days will go, the better my transactions will go, the better my lead gen will go, the better my marketing will be, the more relaxed on camera I'm going to be. All these different things become relevant.
I love it.
We're not taught to be us.
No, and it's it's part of being self-aware. And I think a lot of times we don't have self-awareness. Somebody told me one time we need to go to the balcony more often. And then going to the balcony means we look down on ourselves and we say, am I really being my best version of myself right now? And a lot of times we're not. We're like, well, how can I be the best version of myself? What would I do to coach myself right now in this moment? And that's what you're talking about, being self-aware, which I think is great. Jack Welch, years ago, he wrote a book, the guy that used to run GE for years and never had a bad quarter, always took the company up. He said, he would train all of his managers that when they came back from vacation to treat themselves as if they were brand new to their job and go to zero, start from scratch. And when you say every day or every minute or every hour, or every day is a fresh page, that's what it's like, right? We can reset at any time, which I think is so smart and really, what great leaders do is be open to being, being able to change and be self-aware, which I think is smart.
But it's hard
So
because we're not taught that.
yeah, nobody. I mean, it's not. We're always taught that we got to be successful out of the gate, and there's no failure, and only losers fail, and that kind of thing, which is just totally wrong.
Right.
The most successful people are built on a mountain of failures, which I love.
100%.
So Ray, I know everybody's going to say, okay, I got to start listening to Ray because I love this guy. And where can they find your podcast and learn more about you and what you're up to?
Just go to my website. You'll find everything I'm doing. It's RaymondSjolseth.com, RaymondSjolseth.com. You'll find everything. You can also Google the Agent Podcast. You can also Google just me, Raymond Sjolseth, and my website will be the first one that comes up.
And you guys are going to go head on into the real estate biz. Where are you practicing so people can send you a referral if they have somebody they want to send to you?
So we joined EXP and we're in Chicago.
Chicago market. Perfect. Okay. Ray, it was great to talk to you. Thank you so much for dropping all that great information on us
Jim,
today.
thanks for having me.